episode number 13 of True Health. And before I even introduce this stud today, I gotta tell you a story about him. I can guess why he's somewhat successful. He sent me, well, I sent him originally a Google Docs with a script, and he sent me back an outline that, I mean, literally, I think I should just, I'm going to put this outline on Amazon and see if I can make money off of it because it's so good. But then an hour before the show, he revised it and it's even better. So the amount of planning that this guy did in preparation for this lowly old podcast with me is significant. So that just goes to show why my guest today, Jeff Roberts, is probably doing pretty well. So Jeff, just kind of say hi and tell us just briefly who you are, what you do.
Thank you, Beau. Jeff Roberts, and I own Jeff Roberts and Associates, which is a private wealth advisory firm with Ameriprise Financial. And for the last 26 years, I've essentially dedicated my life to a vision that is to be the obvious choice for guiding clients to joyfully steward their resources. And so that's essentially what we do. We help people with money.
And I know this show is called True Health, and this is actually the first kind of foray into the financial health world. And Jeff and I have talked a couple times about this, and I think most people out there would understand that obviously finances will impact your health, but I don't think people really fully grasp all the time to what degree. And that's a lot of what today's show is going to revolve around is, you know, how does that pillar of financial health and wealth management affect everything else? And that was what Jeff and I had a conversation that, again, I wish was on vinyl when we were on the phone the other day, because everything he was saying, I was like, this is A, the first time I've heard it put this way, B, the connections that you were making, right? The way that you were putting the dots together between, goal setting and your values and financial management. It was just awesome. So before we dive into all these tips and tactics and this wealth of knowledge that, of course, we can condense how many years of practice and experience into an hour podcast, tell me, why did you get into financial advising?
A couple things. To go back to 1992, at that time, the only thing that was happening in the financial services industry was you could be a stockbroker, an insurance agent, or be in some bank management track. Mm-hmm. And I had a degree from Stanford in finance and was actually envisioning going to law school. Well, at that time, there was everybody and their brother was going to law school, and the movie The Firm with Tom Cruise just came out.
Also, when did Wall Street come out?
That was before. I want to say it was like 86.
87? Yeah.
86, 87,
yeah.
Something like that. John Grisham started writing all those legal books,
yeah,
if you will, around that time. So law schools were flooded. And I was never a good test taker at all, a terrible test taker. And so my LSAT scores couldn't get me in law school. So I want to go interview in the financial services industry. So I found stockbroker, insurance agent, or being a bank branch manager or something like that track. And none of those things were really what I was seeking. And simultaneously, the company that I'm franchising through, Ameriprise Financial at that time, the local office had a guy that was visiting the Boston location, because the Boston location was crazy successful. And so we went up there to find out, why is this office so much successful than everybody else? And come to find out that there's 54 colleges and universities in Boston.
Just feeding it.
And so what they did is he would go to all those schools and say, give me the top 5 resumes out of your business school. And then they would get they want the ones that are hungry and work themselves through school and that sort of thing. So somehow or another that Stanford must have screwed up and given them my resume or something. So I get this letter requesting an interview. And so long story short, it was just a perfect alignment of the opportunity that I wanted, which was a comprehensive financial planning advice business. And with a 21-year-old guy that was just hungry and dying to do it. And then you couple with that, I think another reason I got into it was my family experience. I tell my grandmother's story. My grandparents retired in the 70s, and they had pension income. They're both deceased now. Mm-hmm. And they had like Social Security and pensions, which we have 401k plans and things like that today, and that stuff doesn't really exist as much. But back then, they were living on a fixed income and were saving more in retirement than they were when they had been working because they didn't have mortgage payments and kids anymore. So they wanted to set aside some money for their 4 grandsons.
Mm-hmm.
They put some money into a trust, and they met with their financial guy. Well, come to find out, it was supposed to be something that years and years down the road, when I was 65 years of age, myself, my brother, and my cousins were going to have $1 million saved up. If we screwed up our lives, screwed up our lives, your grandparents had put this in place for you. And I was young when we heard about this. Well, fast forward, I don't know, 15 years later, whatever it is, 12 years later, I'm getting out of school and I'm studying stuff about finances and thinking, I don't remember anything working like that. So I approached my folks and my mom and grandparents, and they were reluctant to share anything. It's, oh, you're not supposed to remember all that. That's for you down the road. Don't worry about that. That's all set up and taken care of. And after some pushing, I got them to allow me to look at the documents and find out what this was. And it turns out it was just 4 life insurance policies sold on the life of 4 boys with premium payments of $10,000 each being put into these policies. Well, in the 70s, interest rates were really high, and so projections of those policies were expected to grow that money at crazy high rates. Well, interest rates came down. And so, long story short, the cash value of the policies was being eroded by the costs of the insurance. And by the time I found it at age 21 and 22, these policies had about $1,800 of cash left in it.
Oh my gosh.
And my grandmother wept. Literally.
Oh, I'm sure.
How could this happen? How could someone do this to us? And that was that pivotal moment in life that we all have when you realize the direction of your life forever changed because of that moment.
It's pretty rare, honestly, because I don't think many people can pin down that moment.
When it happens, it's the light bulb deal. And so I knew then I've got to go into this business, this industry, and help people from, or prevent this sort of thing from happening to good people. And it was really just about serving. It wasn't necessarily that it was such a terrible product. There wasn't ever any follow back up to say, this strategy isn't working anymore.
Yeah.
So in the long answer to the question, how'd you get in the business, it was motivated by a family situation that inspired me to want to help other people to avoid those pitfalls.
Which is maybe not rare because obviously I don't come from your field, but I think it's pretty cool that you come from truly a servant's heart coming into that field that is based on finances. You know what I mean? So I would venture to say, you tell me if I'm wrong, that most people that get into wealth management are getting into it to add their own wealth management a bit more. I'm sure that that is also, obviously you wouldn't be doing this if you didn't take care of your own house.
Sure.
But I just like that you come from it from that aspect because that's going to have a different, your outcomes are going to be different if you're driven by the purpose of giving.
It reminds me of a statement one of my mentors in the business early on, Doug Lennox, once said about financial advisors, that they require the right balance of having the mind of a capitalist and yet the heart of a social worker. And that is spot on with what I believe a great financial advisor does.
Absolutely. Well, so let's kind of, and this show is, it's like a non-linear thinking, which Jeff will love. He's purported to me that he's self-diagnosed ADHD, so get ready to hop all over the place.
That's why I have notes about it.
Yeah, but we're going to bounce real quick because we are talking about health, and we just figured out why Jeff got into financial management. But Jeff and I met through the LOC, right, through Iron Tribe.
Correct.
Iron Tribe, for the people that don't know that aren't local, was a CrossFit affiliate at one time, broke off franchise, became this giant company, but just imagine CrossFit style workouts. So we met in there, so there's our health venue, our environment, right? Jeff's a runner, I'm a runner, so everybody gives us crap when we go to the gym because they get mad because nobody likes running in that scenario. But we met in the gym, and that's when I first started asking Jeff, like, hey, would you want to come on the show? And it's about health, and you know, I kind of started thinking, well, how do we tie wealth management to health? And one of your first comments was about peace, right? You can't. It's almost impossible to have anything in your life go the way you want it. Not that you have to have, like, I think, just coffers filled with money, but the peace that comes from true financial management. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up right now is I want to kind of poke a hole in it for the purpose of conversation. So, first of all, can you explain what you hear in the notes when you kind of say, identifying what peace means to you? Right? Like, what does it take to create peace in your life? And maybe tell a story that you told me where you had to go where you were and where you came to find what you realized, like, I didn't have peace in my life at all. I was chasing, you kind of told me the story, I was chasing, I had things, right? It was just things.
Yep.
And then you realize what you were missing, and then you're like, you literally told me, you're like, I'm at the point in my life where, like, I have peace. Like, I have that.
Yeah, it's kind of a series of life experiences that has led me to some of this thinking. It's not that I'm proclaiming to have any all overwhelming knowledge on it.
Wait, you're not writing a self-help book?
Although there will be a book one day.
Ooh,
These things are going to be.
You heard it here.
Yeah, these things will be in my book. Oh, it's a life goal.
Fantastic.
That's a bucket list thing. But peace. Eventually, what I realized is we'll talk about all of these today. But there's happiness, there's peace, there's joy, and we'll dig into each of those. But the peace component is, I think, the one that's most elusive to most people. And for the longest time, it was to me.
I would agree.
One of my good friends, an actor, Tony Hale, also one time used the word stillness. I love these, so I mean stillness in my life, and sometimes I thought peace can also be related to stillness, which that's one to really ponder on.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, peace is really about the conditioning of the heart, or a condition of the heart where anxiety, conflict, and fear no longer trouble you. Now, you might have them in your life,
Right.
but they're not overriding you. And so it becomes, peace then becomes when anxiety, conflict, and fear now are somewhat controlled emotionally, then it allows for contentment. And that's why I was making some notes on that. It's kind of, peace is something that we all aspire to, but that contentment is where you're just able to say, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good. And so many of us, via our jobs and finances, create anxiety, conflict, and fear. And until you can just grasp that as the issue and define it, then it helps you to be able to overcome it. And to me, you can't have overall health unless you are able to control the anxiety, conflict, and fear in your life. And if we think about, we're talking about overall health, I mean, you've got spiritual health, mental health, financial health, physical health. And so each of those conflict, anxiety, fear, can have a major impact on those. And in the lack of financial planning can create also tons of anxiety, conflict, and fear, which then can impact health and everything else.
And I brought this stat up on, I believe, last episode, 70 to 90% of doctors' visits have a primary stress component behind them.
Wow.
So all of what you were saying there, the anxiety, fear, and conflict, those from an effectual standpoint are stress, right? Those are the things, but they cause stress.
Well, and back to what you were asking me on my story, which was interesting too, to touch on that. So if you peel away the onion of our lives and you dig all the way back, I had a wonderful upbringing with incredible parents that provided an amazing life for us. Love all in our house, no doubt about it. But later in kind of middle school, high school, I think it was maybe high school, my father lost his job, which at 54 years of age, when you lose your job in kind of a middle upper level management type company, then that can create difficulty financially on a family. And hard to find a job at that age, and particularly in that economy. So finances were tough. But when I grew up in a neighborhood with lots of friends and family that were a little bit more affluent financially, being able to participate in things that they were able to participate in were very difficult for us. And so when I wanted to do something fun, let's say go on a ski trip or something, we couldn't do it because we couldn't afford that.
Right.
And so what subconsciously my mind is hearing is, I can't go have this fun because we can't afford it. So then it's like money. If I had the money, then I'd be able to have fun. So money equals fun. Fun is happy. Money equals happiness. So fast forward that several years of thinking. And so by the way, then what I did to remedy that situation was I went and got a paper out, mowed yards, got multiple jobs, and was bringing in money in high school for myself and doing quite well. And realized, hey, this is great. I can make my own money and have these things.
Mm-hmm.
So then I go into the business world and start figuring out a way to help people with their money, which then ultimately helps me to accomplish my goals. And so over time, I started realizing that I was just building the mindless accumulation of stuff and things, but there was really never that peace that we had talked about, and which gets into the whole discussion of happiness, which we can go down that rabbit hole as well.
And this is what I wanted to ask, and we'll get into, we're kind of working from backward forward. We'll get into the tactics, right? Kind of some of Jeff's principles that he uses. Nothing too specific, but just kind of the big pieces. But what I want to ask here, because I was reading through this, and obviously I told Jeff when I have people on the show, I want to learn things. And I'll admit something. When I got out of college, finances were my worst struggle. Right? I came out with student loan debt. I had jobs. I had very good paying jobs, but one of Jeff's, I know it's on here somewhere, is the five habits of money management. Spend less than you earn. I didn't take that advice coming out of college, right? Bad move. But I had to deal with the strife of that. So my first question on the back and forth here, and we're not talking about financial management, let's just talk about resources. So obviously we know that poor financial management can create stress, right? It can create that fear, anxiety, conflict. What do you say to somebody that doesn't have many resources at all? Because we obviously realize that a lower socioeconomic upbringing and lifestyle creates or correlates to health issues. And we think that's due to the inability to pay for health care. We also know it causes stress, right? So there's all of those things that are creating the bad health. Now I can't pay for the health care to take care of the stress conflict. What would you say to somebody if they came to you and they're like, Jeff, I don't have a lot of money. I don't have a lot of resources. I know we have these steps for if maybe we do have some resources, how to manage them, but what would be your advice to somebody like that?
The first thing that comes into mind, there's a client that comes to my head that I work with, one of my largest clients financially. And this is a gentleman that never made more than $50,000 in his entire life, ever. And raised 2 boys by himself. So what I've learned over time is that although having lots of income or lots of money certainly helps, but in the absence of it doesn't mean that you still can't plan correctly and accomplish your goals. Because the fundamentals of planning make sense for someone that has no money versus someone that has tons of money. And so the idea is I apply those same principles, we just do it in smaller steps. And as difficult as it sounds, even with not a lot of money, you can still accomplish great things financially with correct planning and the right habits.
So probably more important for proper planning with limited resources, correct?
There's absolutely no doubt about it, because the same things that derail people with lots of money derail the people with very little money. It's just the difference is there's no margin of error when you have a small amount. So all the more reason why those principles are key. You mentioned the very first one. Spend less than you earn. Simple.
Seems like common sense, but that's probably the most pervasive problem in American culture as far as financial hardship.
There's no
for
question.
People that have adequate resources.
There's no question. And it gets back to those, it's because people have a very difficult time managing wealth and being objective with their own money.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. It's hard for me to be objective with my own money.
Largely.
I mean, if I walked down and found a bag of $100,000, I want to buy a bass boat. There's all kinds of fun things I want to get.
Yeah.
But we don't rarely find that bag and say, wow, this is going to help me to accomplish my financial objectives. You just think of all the fun stuff that you can do. So that same mindset applies no matter where you are in the financial spectrum. And so those principles apply to the person that makes very little money as well. Unfortunately, the tough part is it's challenging to find good financial advice for people in all spectrums of the universe financially. It's tough.
And the reason I ask that question is because I don't want anybody to walk away from listening to this conversation and hear, and Jeff will explain this further, hear that money buys happiness and that proper wealth management will reduce stress, which leads to a happy life. We're not basing that on how much you have, right?
Correct.
We're basing that on how well you plan, which a plan is great, and we always know that a plan changes, right? But the plan is based on goals. and somebody who has millions of dollars could have the exact same goals as somebody who makes $35,000 a year. I guess, what would you install the same tax? It sound like you would. If somebody came to you and they're like, I want to have a legacy, right? Which is, I looked at your pyramid. Basically, this is a pyramid. It looks like a food pyramid, but the bottom rung is covering essentials, right? So it's like Maslow's hierarchy almost, right? Next is ensuring lifestyle. So above covering essentials, I'm guessing that means whatever do I want nice things? Do I?
Yeah, it's the things above and beyond the essentials that define really our lifestyle. I don't have to go to the movies, and I don't have to go to Perry's for dinner tonight. But
It's
I might,
nice though, isn't it?
but I might choose to do that.
Right.
Correct. But I have to pay my electric bill. That's the essentials. Those are those fundamentals,
Mm-hmm.
which are all part of the the confident retirement approach.
Mm-hmm.
And what you were asking a moment ago was about the top piece, which is leaving a legacy.
Well, and what I was trying to get to, let's go through the rest of the pyramid and we'll get to the legacy. So next is ensuring lifestyle. And I'll ask a offshoot question. I told you this is an ADHD podcast. That's what it should be called. Do you think people nowadays are getting essentials and lifestyle mixed up? Do you know what I mean by that?
Absolutely. The answer is yes. No question. They know the difference is the key.
It sounds familiar.
And that's why I hold up. They know the difference. It's just whether or not they are cognitively thinking, yes, this is actually not an essential, this is a luxury part of my life. As we expand our financial lives, as we make more money, as we are more successful, we add a degree of complication to our lives as well. In most cases, most people don't, if you think about it, most people aren't living the same simple, low-expense lifestyle they were the first year, second year out of college. As they make more money and double their incomes, they double the lifestyle as well. And all of that increased lifestyle becomes more complication, which then makes it feel like it's the essentials of life that we're covering, but it's really, really not. And back to the person that we spoke on a minute ago who has a small amount of money or a small amount of income, what's interesting about them, they're at a little bit of an advantage because they have not yet most likely expanded their life to where it's become so complicated. So they still can plan because they haven't overextended in many cases, hopefully.
So then the next one up is preparing for the unexpected. So when you have I would say almost the luxury of ensuring a proper lifestyle after the essentials are covered, now you can kind of stow away something for in case.
And at that level, you begin to protect the things that you can't afford to lose.
Jeff is he's like a sensei.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm here with Mr. Miyagi.
But that one's really true because, and this relates to your job. I mean, you've seen this. People at 35 years of age, you're 7 times greater of being disabled than you are of dying at that age. And so, if you make $75,000 a year and $150,000 a year, well, if you had a machine in your garage that produced that income for your family, would you get some insurance on it? And say, well, yeah, absolutely. Well, you're that machine, and yet some people don't have insurance to protect, say, for example, their income.
Yeah.
Which would be an example of disability insurance. Disability, life insurance, long-term care, all of those, making sure that there's a reasonable level of protection because it can be devastating if an event occurs, a health event occurs, and income stop.
Yeah.
And we have seen that, and that's why it's listed.
We see it
it's
all
one
the
of the
time.
cornerstones. There's no question.
Yeah.
I'm sure you do all the time.
And it is devastating. You see people that, what's hard nowadays is the disability raters and lawyers are far more scrupulous because the system has been taken advantage of. So it's harder to get disability payouts. So if you don't have your own plans in effect and your employer is trying to pull back the reins on some of that stuff, we've seen numerous people that ended up with nothing.
Yeah, and that's why it's a part of that confident retirement approach that we talked about. Once you get the essentials and then the lifestyle expenses, you got to protect, which is, again,
100%. So then next, that top tier that we were alluding to earlier is that legacy. And this is what I was trying to ask. So legacy is fantastic. Some people, my dad's joke is, he goes, your legacy is, I will leave you with nothing. Like, you have nothing to pay for, but you get nothing. We were talking about this weekend. What would you say to somebody, and this is my question, I just want to understand your kind of thought process. Somebody walks into your office, let's put them, what's the American average income?
About 64, 65,000 roughly household.
Yeah.
64, 65,000 is the average.
So let's put somebody there,
Okay.
and then somebody that's making $250,000 a year. And both of these people say, not in numeric terms, but I want to leave a legacy to my family. Same tactics employed for both people, different. Obviously it's different, there's all these different vehicles and everything for financial gain. But without the specifics, are the tactics and the thought process the same? And the reason I ask, before you answer, is so people can start to understand that it is a mindset. That's what we kept talking about on that phone call the other night. The mindset behind your finances, which we will tie this into all the health side here pretty soon, but this is just massive, right? You said your subconscious mind picked up the money and fun. Subconscious mind is powerful. So if you can help people change their mindset, now they're on their way.
There's no question. And to answer the question about that piece on whether or not it's the same, at that level, essentially, yes, it is the same. Whether you're making a household income of $65,000 or $200,000, if your desiring goal is to leave a legacy, the tools and techniques are basically going to be identical. What we begin defining is what that looks like. And my goal would be to go a step further to say, okay, if you want to leave a legacy, oftentimes it's actually more important not to concentrate on the amount of money that you're leaving for your legacy, but making sure that the survivors you're leaving the money to are equipped to handle it. Because if you think about it, and I'm sure this could get a lot of negative messages on a Facebook page or something, but
all right, let's hear it.
Here's the statement. And I've seen this by experience in 26 years, if you hand large amounts of money to somebody in their 20s, myself included, they don't manage it well.
I just told you what I was doing.
And if I had inherited a large amount of money in my 20s, chances are the decisions I make then would be different than the decisions today, which we'll talk later about because that's about values. Your values change.
Absolutely.
So if your goal is to leave a legacy, it's making sure, again, that those people receiving the legacy are equipped and maturely financially to handle that correctly. And many of the times that's not the case. And so as you can imagine, I work with not just people that have small amounts of wealth, medium amounts of wealth, also very large amounts of wealth. And we see this a lot where people receive inheritances and they're just not equipped or managed to deal with it. And it is amazing how fast money gets blown.
Is it part of your practice? Do you try to bring, if you see, say somebody has an inheritance or a trust set up for a family member downstream, kind of like your grandmother thought, was the case, do you try to bring them in?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As much family financial planning as we can be involved in, you bet. And oftentimes that's what our clients want, is they want their children and grandchildren to come in and meet their financial advisor. This is who you come see. I've been in situations many times where the clients have looked at their children and grandchildren and said, Jeff understands what was important to us with this money and what we want you to use it for. You'll be able to do whatever you want. We ask that you live by our wishes. He'll always know that. What's the saddest part to me is when I watch people that I have worked with for many years, watch them sacrifice and make difficult decisions in their life to preserve the integrity of a nest egg that they have for their entire lives, and then pass it on to a survivor who just in a matter of years, it's gone. And I'm telling you, it happens often.
Which, that's kind of almost like the end cap on that piece part for those people from the financial management realm, right? Like you said, they sacrificed, they worked their whole life to create peace for themselves. They're trying to create it for the next generation, but to put the wax seal on that envelope before you hand it off is you have to train them or change their mindset before you hand that blessing off to them, and I love that you bring that up because, it makes sense, but I just don't know how many people talk about that stuff, like my mom, we had a conversation a couple weekends ago, and it was all about what's going to happen after she passed away, how much money she's leaving us, and I said, Mom, I don't care how much money you leave. She goes, well, I do, and I understand, I want her around as long as possible. She wants to leave a legacy because, like you said, she has sacrificed her whole life. She worked a low-income job, built a retirement, has done well And it's just interesting to me that a huge part of that is, what if I was that kid? If it would have happened at 22, 23 years old, that's exactly what would have happened. I would have, thrown her away. And not now, if I would have met you later in my life, you would have told me, what were you doing?
What you doing, Beau?
What'd you do to your mom? Right? But you alluded to this comes down to the legacy piece, and kind of all of this comes down to values, right? Like the legacy that you leave based on, the person that's making average income versus a very substantial income comes down to what they value, right? That's going to determine what they leave, who they leave it to, what they're trying to, what's the goal to leave that money to those people. So they're, do they want them to be able to take care of their kids? Do they just want them to be, compliant? Do they, some people set up, you can tell me better than I can tell everybody else, but where they only get a certain amount of money every once in a while, so they don't want them to have this giant amount.
The trust.
What are just some ways that you go about helping people identify values? How do you define values, I guess, first of all?
Well, what we're basically talking about is, how do we engage with clients? And it starts with conversations around goals and values. Typically, first we start with goals, just to help people define what it is that they're trying to accomplish. What are you trying to do?
Mm-hmm.
What brings you in? But for some clients, in some cases, we have to go a lot deeper than that. And we have to really begin to figure out those core values,
Mm-hmm.
especially when people aren't sure about what they really want to accomplish with their
Mm-hmm.
goals. Oftentimes it's because they're not entirely aligned with their values.
Mm-hmm.
I was even making some notes on that, but I guess the easiest way to grab that is you become what you believe. That's the first statement, right? So this is where we get a little deep.
No, I love it.
If you can embrace that concept that you become what you believe over and over and over. If you say, I'm not going to be successful, I'm not going to exercise, I'm not going to overweight, I'm never going to be slim, I'm never going to be trim, I'm never going to be athletic. If you keep saying that to yourself, you will eventually follow that mindsetting path.
Which Jeff has no clue what my last 2 episodes are on. I would love him to listen, but I don't think he has. That's literally what we talked about the last 2 episodes. This is just what you hit on. That's been a hot topic based on some books I've read, the questions that people have asked, so I love that you're bringing that up here.
So, and if we become what we believe, then our values actually shape our beliefs. And sometimes our values are no longer aligned with our beliefs, which is kind of an interesting one. Like how I learned the lesson that, early in life I was kind of learning, or thinking that I was learning that, money is buying happiness, and so therefore that's got to go get a bunch of money so I can go be happy. And over time you begin to realize that my values and my beliefs really aren't in sync anymore. I've got to figure that component out. So we have to help clients to figure out what their real values are, because if you want to be successful in life, you have to live a life in alignment with your actual real behavior and what your real values are. Because, for example, people come in my office all the time and say, I want to educate my children. I've got to educate my children. And then it takes me about 15 minutes to look at their financial situation and realize, no, you don't want to educate your children. Because if you want to know anything about people, look at the way they spend money. That tells you all you need to know. And if you're really desiring to educate your kids, you will be setting money aside for your kids' education. And in the absence of any steps whatsoever at all taken towards kids' education, to say that this is like your mission in life to provide kids' education, well, it's not aligning with your behavior and what you're saying your values are. So in some situations with clients, we find the need to help clients with a values exercise. So we'll lay literally an exercise of 50 values on the table, like on cards. So here's 50 of them. Take half of them and rule them to the side if you say these just don't reflect me. Set them aside. And then when you're down to 25, we say, all right, take it down to 15 that identify who you are, values that are truly who you are. And there's a difference between your ideal self and your real self. Now, sometimes people have their real self and their ideal self are kind of one, which is good. And then other times we're far away from our ideal self. And so the idea in the values exercise is listing out what are these values for who your ideal self is. So we narrow it down to 15, then we narrow it down to 10, and then we narrow it down to just 5 core values that help define someone's overall core to say, yep, these are the 5 things that kind of represent me. This is it. Now go make financial decisions. With that in mind, make financial decisions. And what we find is when you're down to those core levels, they're so interrelated. You can't make a decision that's independent of another value. So that's when really making the right decisions is kind of easy, because you know exactly what the foundation is that really drives you in life.
Which removes a bit of the emotional
No question.
Aspect of money.
No question. And logic sets in at that time. Which is, so defining values and helping people to really see them and then live them is just gigantic, which is what we call live in alignment. And so, again, it's behavior and your actual values. And is my behavior in line with my value?
So let's draw some parallels here. So we talk a lot about like movement and health and the body and rehab and injury here. Everything that you just said, if we removed finances and plugged in pain or injury, it'd be the identical conversation we have with patients, right? Your beliefs frame who you are. The story you tell yourself can self-identify you with dysfunction and pain. Your values, right? You value eating healthy, nutritious food, moving often, having meaningful relationships. And so this is a myopic topic, right? We're looking at finances, but like you said, all we're trying to do overall with like a show like this, if you met with somebody like Jeff and myself, is over and over again, if you meet with the best people in any field, it's far less, in my opinion, you tell me what you think, it's far less about the specifics of what you do, but like you just said, you're trying to create, it's not like you want somebody to come in and you're like, I'm making you a better human. But that's your goal. Your goal, you told me this the other day, your goal is not to give them a huge portfolio. If you allow them to realize like, ooh, all of this stuff is affecting me and all the parts of my life, my family, all of a sudden the person realizes, oh, to actually have a better financial scenario, I have to be a better person.
You nailed it, because if you think back to those areas of health, you have physical health, you have spiritual health, mental health, and financial health. And what you're basically saying is the principles that apply to one oftentimes apply to them all, and that's true. I mean, let's just
and maybe they just should. Maybe that's what people need to realize.
Right, and let's just think about any given task. Like, let's say getting up and going to work every day. Right, so if you think about getting up and going to work, picture a pair of tennis shoes, picture a bicycle, picture a car, picture a helicopter. Right, so if my goal is I've got to get to work, I have a choice just for those 4 things. Now, my values might dictate the decision that I make. If I want to show up in style, I'm getting a helicopter. I'm going to spend money. I'm going to get a helicopter. I'm going to fly into work on a helicopter.
If you're working with Jeff Robertson Associates, you can take the helicopter to work.
That's right. That's right. So when you come landing in the helicopter in the parking lot, get out and walk inside, with your briefcase or whatever, it's making a statement.
Yeah.
You might say, no, I don't really care to do it. It's too expensive. I cannot afford that, because that impacts my financial health. Okay, so then you say, well, I don't want to drive because I don't want to leave a carbon footprint, so you could bike to work. Okay, so fine, because that's more important. Or you might say, my health is really important, and I would rather jog and run to work. But then you might say, gosh, it takes me an hour to run to work every day. And so then I'm stressed because I can't get my work done, I've got to work late, I come home late, I can't go to my kids' games. So then you see how these all relate. My physical health, so I run to work, is impacting my time, so I can't have my family life. So all of these things end up kind of connecting, and I know it's a simple example, but if you think about it, finances are no different. People come in, and I see oftentimes patterns that people are taking, and I just step back from the trees and look at the forest and say, well, instead of biking, why don't you just drive your car? Or instead of driving your car, why don't you bike to work? Using that again as an example, but there's oftentimes simple ways to solve people's financial, physical problems. And you see that, I know, with your job, because somebody comes in and have an issue with their golf swing and their back is hurting, and you realize it's about the way they're twisting or turning. It's a particular movement. If they fix that one movement, everything else starts to work. So they are all related in many cases.
And what do you? So say that somebody comes into you and you can see that there is a gross malalignment between where they want to go and where they are. Obviously, you're not a psychologist. I'm not either. We're not a psychiatrist. And your job is ultimately, as their wealth management financial advisor, to work on their finances. What's a Jeff Roberts tactic? Like, how do you go about, because finances are emotional and they're very private, right? Like you said, show me how somebody spends their money, and I'll basically tell you quite a bit about that person. That's why people don't want to open their pocketbook to somebody and show them, the records. What do you do if you really realize, it's not that this person is uneducated or miseducated about financial management. It's the fact that the way they're living their life is destroying what they actually want. Or I'm sure somebody's come into you and said, just help me. Maybe they don't have a goal. Just help me. What do you, if you see that, how do you attack that?
Yeah, that's where the fundamentals of what we do are rooted in financial planning. And so let's use the example you gave a second ago where somebody is kind of misaligned with the decisions and way they're living their life financially, and they're directly hurting themselves financially for their future because they're not doing what they should. And they might not even see that yet. Where the easiest part of my job is laying before them the mathematics that simply says, you said very clearly via our discussion, we defined that you want to be here. And I'm making this up, let's say it's retirement. I used kids' education earlier, let's say it's retirement. I want to retire at this age, and I need to have this level of income coming in to sustain the lifestyle that I want to have for the rest of my life. So we define what that is. And then mathematically, I can show, based on what you've done so far today and what you're doing every single year, this is where you're going to be in the future. And we can compare to say, are you on track? Are you not on track? Are you short? How short? And then translate that back to a dollar amount today that if someone was short, in the case that you gave, where they clearly would be if they were making bad decisions, I would say, if this is what you say that you want to accomplish, and we develop that goal together, I lay out in front of them, here's the dollar amount that you have to save. Now it's up to you. So is this goal important, or is it not? If it is, this is what you have to do. So you can't hide from the numbers. And it's the same thing with you. Somebody comes in and they've got a back issue or whatever else. You can lay out the path. Do this, stretch this way, practice this movement. If you do it, we'll get you on the right path to health. If they come in a week later and they're completely hurting, but they have no more flexibility, then they haven't done the things that they've been needing to do. There's no stretching involved. So our jobs in that sense are identical. We can prescribe the remedy. We can tell them exactly how to fix it.
It's still up to them.
But it's like I've said, we're looking at this horse right there. Can I see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So
This is the first showing of the horse's head in quite a while. This is Bucky.
I've been looking at Bucky this entire time. So we can lead the horse to water. I love this. And you can even take water and throw it up into the horse's mouth. I can dunk the horse's mouth into the water. But if this horse does not open and swallow, it's not happening. But we can literally. You and I do this a lot.
You heard it from the horse's mouth. That's what we used to say. Oh, Bucky, we missed you. No, it's not crazy to me. It's just funny, or maybe ironic, how similar the conversations that we probably have with people, but also the irony and the excuses you get for why things won't work are the exact opposite of what I get for the opposite reason, right? People are going to come to me and say, it's the finances that get in the way of me following through with the goals that you've laid out in front of me. Some people may come to you and say, well, my health's so bad I can't go work like that, like I need to go get that money, or I have all these health expenses that are set, they're fixed, right? Because I have to have my insulin that's $1,000 a month, I have to, which is a real cost and a real scenario for a lot of people, absolutely. But it's just funny, the dichotomy between the two that, and this should hopefully elucidate to a lot of people, everything is everything. You cannot dissect or reduce your life into parts. You have to create a game plan for your life, and that doesn't mean that you have to have this 30-year vision of where I want to be. I think what we're both getting at here today, and this could be the premise of the show, you have to create a filter for your life. You have to create that foundation, and I love what you've been saying about, you basically, your beliefs are formed off your values, and it's finances are not faith-based. It's it's pragmatic, right? It's systematic. It's a plan, and if people realize if I can create that filter, it gets easier, not harder. I think a lot of people don't want to take the hard step first of doing this. This is a hard exercise to actually say, hey, these are my 5 things that I'm going to live and die by. That's what I got. That's hard for people because they want to do that 80% of the time.
Correct.
And then 20% of the time, and I know these 5 are important, but I'm going to go do this today. But you make it really easy when you say, no, like, does that match or no? And I know that's way easier said than done, but I love that, and that's so important for finances, mental health, relational health, spiritual health. You have to set the foundational principles, which is what this whole true health thing is about, is set the principles for your life. Your principles are different from mine, right? We're all individuals, we're all humans, but at the end of the day, if you don't have a plan, you're going to be as lost as anybody else.
And as we're discussing, this whole thing is again about spiritual, financial, mental, financial health, physical, spiritual, financial. All of those are related because I know in your job, at some point or the other, you're talking about one of the other areas of health as well. It might just be the mental health where they're saying, I can't do this, Beau.
Right.
I can't do this. And you're having to help them overcome the mindset. Well, actually, yeah, you can. Or it could be a financial issue that I can't go join the gym because it costs too much money. And you're having to coach them through other options. So we both deal in other areas of health other than just, people's health other than just the physical health and other just the financial health. So again, they're extremely related. Which is why we're here.
Well, that's why I wanted to have you on the show. I know people can sit down and say, well, I know I have to pay for health insurance. I know I have to pay for a hospital bill. I know I have to pay for medication. Now you go up in those levels, right? Well, okay, those are my health costs. Well, those are your sick costs. What are your health costs? It's the stuff we just said: buying, good food, eating good food, paying for the gym membership, not working all the time, right? Having enough financial freedom to not have to be in the office 80 hours a week because you are financially planning smart on the back end. But people start to very quickly not put thought into action. So they know that I need to buy the good food, I can go buy it, and I may still go get fast food even though it's in my fridge at home, right? Or I have the gym membership and I never go, which is how Planet Fitness makes all its money. They don't want you to show up. These things are being marketed to us. They're using our subconscious. I say them, like it's this evil, it's just business, right? People have figured out this is financially lucrative to cash in on people's subconscious flaws, right? Or shortcomings. I hate to say it like that, but that's the truth.
It gets back to mental health because all these different healths we're talking about, they're taking advantage of people's mental health,
right?
Of where they are in an area or mindset of scarcity, or they are seeking the happiness, don't know anything about peace or joy,
right?
And they're thinking that through all these different means and the world of marketing out there is designed to directly communicate to people, come here, come this way, and we're going to fix your issues.
Yeah.
We're going to fix your issues. When, as we discussed in our previous conversation, they're chasing the wrong thing more times than not.
So I had no clue I wanted to bring this up. Let's talk about this real quick. So talking about that kind of instant gratification, and I just want to hear your thoughts on this because this is a very prevalent thing. So the whole, and you probably know what I'm going to ask, the whole cryptocurrency thing. To me, that's a very immediate, I want massive, lucrative financial windfall right now. Right? And you don't have to tell me the deep facts of it, but what are your thoughts on anything like that? Anything that's a cash windfall or this not that it's too good to be true, but these unsubstantiated claims for financial, wealth or gain based on something that's who knows what. What's your thought on stuff like that?
Yeah, no, that's easy. That is nothing more than one thing: the fear of being left out. That's all that is. That's all it is. Because it's a great example, and it's not done yet, but I think in the end it will be a great example of how we can point to, remember that time when the perception was, all of a sudden, there's a way to have easy money, right? I don't do anything. I just find some guy that's familiar with the internet well enough to open up some account where I can put some money in, and I don't know anything about a beneficiary arrangement or how I might get that money back out or how it's taxed in any way, but I'm going to do it anyway because so-and-so said they doubled their money or tripled their money or quadrupled their money. And so when the perception is that it's so easy to make money, what's going on in our minds is I'm fearing that I'm being left out, and I'm fearing that I'm envious awareness of what somebody else has that clearly I want. And all of a sudden, that's when logic gets set to the side, and I make a decision completely based on emotion.
Which is the exact opposite of everything we've been talking about.
Don't even get me started. So my thing on Bitcoin or whatever else it may be, cattle futures or something, investing in biotech stocks, whatever, is I want there to be a logical reasoning on the investment, and it aligns with a particular goal as opposed to just rolling the dice because this is where I think somebody can make a bunch of money. But again, that's back to the mental.
I mean, it is, and people roll the dice on a lot of stuff. Like you said, it's that somebody came up with something that I can do this right now. We'll think about infomercials for six-pack abs in 30 minutes, right? Or diets that are, that's not how it works.
Of course.
And it's not, I am somewhat opposed to the thought nowadays of this this stoic mindset, right? That you have to create struggle in your life or strife in your life to basically get to that next step, right? If you don't go up against hard things often, you will never succeed, you'll never grow as a person. I think that's true to some extent. I think we're taking it a little too far, right? And I guess what I would also ask you is, there are people that are very, very successful in investing that have created their strategy, their tactics, right? Like Warren Buffett, whatever they think they created the algorithm that Warren Buffett's been using for years now. This is kind of what we were just talking about. Is there a secret?
I think so.
Now, is it a secret based on what we've been talking about?
Fundamentals, and that's what you're talking about. It's, come on, Jim. You're saying, Jim, I want you to give me something sexy and fun.
No, and I guess what I'm asking for, is there an easy way, and I guess we need to define, is it easy as in, set your goals, set your values, create easy decision-making processes for yourself? Or is there an easy way where you're like, no, it's actually, there are vehicles of financial investing that are better. There are processes and strategies.
The short answer is it depends. There are no shortcuts is the main thing. And what we generally find creates performance of somebody's portfolio, if we're talking specifically about investing or performance, there's really four things that we find generally that drive performance in a broad category. Four things that drive the performance of a portfolio. One is going to be something called your strategic allocation. And strategic allocation is the way I'm putting my money and the composition of it at a broad level, like stocks, bonds, cash, alternative investments, whatever those broad categories are. The weighting within those. So the amount of money I've going into stocks versus the amount of money that I've got going into bonds or the amount of money in alternatives cash. And aligning that with my desired risk preference. So I'm super aggressive, super conservative. So that big piece, right? That's one. Strategic allocation. Number two is the tactical allocation. Tactical is then going in within those broad categories. And let's say I'm making this up. I'm going to have 60% of my money in stocks. Well, then going into the stocks and tactically selecting the investments that comprise the areas that I want. So small companies, large companies, international, biotech, technology stocks, individual companies, one versus the other. So those are examples of tactical allocations, which is the strategic mix, and then the tactical selection. And then the third thing that's going to determine our performance of our portfolio is the behavioral finance side, investor behavior. And that is, do I get overly nervous when the market was down 300 points or it's up 300 points? And does my behavior change where all of a sudden I make a decision back to emotion versus logic? And then the fourth thing that determines my portfolio's performance will be essentially what the markets do on their own. We control three of the four. The fourth is the market does what the market's going to do. So, for example, when we're sitting down with clients, is we're having to concentrate on the strategic allocation, the tactical allocation, what is our client's behavior. That applies whether you're talking about a $100,000 portfolio or a $150 million portfolio. It's the same concept.
So not necessarily a secret, just very sound strategy. Discipline, a huge word. That's putting the education into action. That's discipline.
It's discipline.
Right there. So all of what you just said, from the individual standpoint, kind of comes down, maybe you tell me if I'm right or wrong, it comes down to these 5 habits of money management. And I want to start getting into the tactics, the brass tacks, because I think Jeff just got himself 200 clients by saying, ooh, there may be a secret. And now people are like, wait a minute, I'm calling this guy. So let's give him tactics, right, from Jeff Robertson Associates. And the reason I want to ask these is there's one I want to ask about in particular. So can you run us through these 5 habits of money management?
Yeah, spend less than you earn. And these are great institution called Kingdom Advisors, which equips men and women in the financial services industry that are Christian, that follow a Christian mindset for planning financially. They had this great list of 5 habits, which is spending less than you earn, set long-term goals, avoid the use of debt, build liquidity into your financial situation, which is i.e. savings, and then give generously. Those are basically the 5 habits, if you will, of sound money management. And then they also actually have another one, which is there's only 5 uses of money. There's only 5 things you can basically do with money. As you can, you live it, meaning your lifestyle. You spend it on lifestyle, so you live it, you give it, you owe it, or you grow it. And the O has 2 components. I either owe in taxes or owe in debt. So again, I spend it on my lifestyle, I give it away, I pay it in taxes, or I pay it in debt, or I save it and grow it. Live, give, owe, grow. Those are the only things you can do with money.
There you go, people. See you later.
That's it. So it's kind of, in fact, when we sit down with people, we basically say, okay, there's 5 things you can do. You spend it on your lifestyle, you can give it away, you pay it in taxes or pay it in debt, or you save it. And we basically break down where's your money going.
Yeah.
And so usually it's going more to lifestyle than it is the areas, or lifestyles and debt.
Yeah.
And taxes should be, I mean, if you're paying too much in taxes, there's a way we can work on that. Everybody's going to pay a certain amount no matter what. But usually the lifestyle and the debt are the 2 biggest ones that we see.
So let's dip into that for a second. And I'm asking, again, I want to learn for myself, but obviously, hopefully there's a lot of physicians that listen to this, so they're going to be in similar scenarios. We started a business fairly new out of school. Would have been, I say impossible, maybe not, maybe I didn't have enough discipline. Would have been impossible for us to start this without debt.
Absolutely.
So how hardcore is that 3rd bullet of avoid the use? It says avoid, so it doesn't say don't. It says avoid.
Correct.
So
Correct.
How do you go about kind of coaching people? What are better uses of debt versus poorer?
You said it clearly. When there's certain stages in life where debt is unavoidable. I mean, very few people coming, say, straight out of school or in most situations have the lump sum of money that they can afford just to pay for a house in cash straight out, or starting a business. It's needed. I've acquired several businesses over time and used debt many times in order to make that happen. But the idea is, and this is obvious, but not letting that get way out of control. Most businesses fail because of cash flow issues. That's it. And when you look at that, you break that down even further, what usually is the biggest driver on cash flow is debt service. It's the amount of cash they have going out just to maintain and service debt. So we are just cautious, and that's why it is avoid, when you can, avoid the use of debt. But it's nearly impossible in many situations when starting businesses just to avoid it. But you obviously, it's cash flow.
So what are you talking about debt? What are your thoughts on the kind of bubble of the student loan issue? And again, I'm asking because I know there are colleagues and friends out there in similar scenarios. I won't even mention Sloan and I's number because I don't want to give you a heart attack here, Jeff. What do you think? Like, what do you think about that whole scenario? What's going to happen? Maybe what's a little foresight, but then also, what do you think most people, let's say 20s to 30s, with high exorbitant amount of student loan debt should be doing to tackle that? Should they be aggressively paying it down, looking for other tactics? Like, what should they be doing there?
My thinking on this is typically fixed. And I may be different than some other people on this one, but I have a belief that there's certain types of debt that I want to get rid of as fast as possible. Student loans are one of them. Car payments is another one. Those tend to be heavy, intensive cash flow eroders. They just tend to suck the money right out of your cash flow to pay for that. I'll have people push back and say, well, wait a minute, why are you paying down a debt on a student loan that's at a competitive interest rate or a car note? I'm getting my car note 0% or 1%, Jeff, why am I paying that now? Well, because it's costing you $600 a month or some crazy number for a car payment or a payment on your student loans. It's the robbing of your cash flow that bothers me the most. Because the cash flow is what people use as the excuse on why I can't fund my kid's education.
Yeah.
Or I can't save enough for retirement. So if the cash flow is the very reason why you can't accomplish you cannot accomplish your goals, then that's the thing I'm going to tackle the most for debt reduction strategy. Is I want to free up the debt so that it frees up the cash flow so that we can accomplish the goals that we want to.
Would you be aggressive enough on that to have somebody dip into savings to tackle debt?
In some cases, yes. Almost exclusively, never, ever, never, ever would I, and again, at first, of course, after reference, I cannot give
Absolutely.
advice to the masses on the radio, so to speak, because everyone's situation is very unique. But I generally speaking would never recommend people carve money out of a retirement plan where they're going to pay taxes and penalties. And I say that because I get asked that all the time. That is too big of a financial hit that you pay just for the reduced after-tax amount that you would then go pay down on debt. I oftentimes recommend people use savings to pay down debt, but never to the detriment of having adequate cash reserves on hand.
And that was kind of, I was thinking the peace part, right? Like, yeah, you're not at peace because you have that monthly installment payment, but if you detract from the savings too much, your overall peace kind of gets, reduced a bit. So I guess it's just kind of that, matching values, risk tolerance, all that stuff. Like you said, it has to be individually based, like good healthcare should be. But the reason I ask is these are the scenarios that we've dealt with, that all of our friends deal with, that everybody deals with. And again, I'm just trying to draw parallels, but it's no different than healthcare nowadays. A ton of info out there. A lot of good stuff, a lot of really bad stuff, but people just don't know how to even filter the good versus bad.
Having done this 26 years, let me give you a few statements of things that I've never heard. Never. I mean, like, never, ever, ever heard. I have never heard anyone say the following: man, I wish I didn't pay off that debt. No one ever says that. And if anyone's listening, don't you dare come to my office and say that just to mess with me. No one says that.
Yeah.
No one ever says things like, man, I wish I didn't save that much for retirement or my kid's education. There's certain things people don't complain about. But I have heard people say, man, I wish I didn't carry that debt as long as I did. So back to the point of, do I recommend people paying things off sooner or faster? It's typically sooner versus later because I've never heard anyone complain about paying things off quickly. And I do have clients, literally they're in their 40s and still have student debts that they're paying on. And in every one of those situations that I'm thinking of, every one of them, it is it's presenting more problems than it is solutions. So, yeah, I'm a big believer in paying off reasonable debts as quickly as we can.
And like you said, it's a void, and I kind of put down here entrepreneurs and student loans. I think if you're obviously you can do this different ways nowadays with crowdfunding and everything from the entrepreneur standpoint. But I think if you want to be an aggressive entrepreneur, and this is my mindset, not from a financial advisor, I think debt is part of the scenario all the time. I mean, to be able to pivot and shift and move very fast, I think it's just part of the scenario now. A lot of the times, the faster you can get rid of the debt, probably the better off you're going to be. So you use it as it's like a shell game to me. I don't know if that makes sense or if you would agree, but I need to use it, but I also need to be making sure that I'm setting myself up to get rid of it as fast as possible via that venture, via that buy. Absolutely, and that's, I mentioned I've bought businesses before, and in each of those, I have used, well, not each of them, but most of them I've used leverage or debt. But in doing so, like you just mentioned, I end up trying to accelerate the time frame or payment schedule so I can get out of that, which frees up the cash flow that I need. Because as I mentioned, businesses fail probably 80% of the time due to lack of cash flow. Yeah. So debt is the biggest constraint on that. Remove the cash flow element tied to debt, and good. So I asked, he put in his notes here, Jeff-isms. I love it. But I had asked him some questions when we talked the other night, and one of them was maybe throw out your opinions on, because this is something that gets talked about a lot, and I think it's used as an excuse, is money benevolent, or just benign? So basically, is money bad, good, or just a thing? So what's your answer to that, Jeff?
My comment is neither. Money is just a tool controlled by people, and money can corrupt. There's no question, but it can also provide shelter and advanced medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see it is inherently bad or good. It's the use of it. It is a tool,
Mm-hmm.
and it's no different than a fork, because you could say a fork can lead to obesity, and I argue it can also feed the hungry.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's just the tool. So how we use it and perceive it, and as I mentioned earlier, the whole happiness conversation. If it is used for the pursuit of happiness alone, it'll do that. But that's not that's not the exact path you want to be going down.
And a lot of the times, happiness alone will not lead to feelings of contentment, health. You're going to be chasing something all the time. That pursuit itself can become the thing that detracts from all other areas of your life, the constant pursuit.
Which is great, because that gets back to the conversation of money buying happiness. And I think we talked about this before, and this can be very controversial when I say it, because people are like, I can't believe you said that. But money buys happiness every single day by definition. That's exactly what money does. In fact, it was Pastor Chris at the Church of the Highlands that did an amazing job in a sermon one time explaining this. He does it much better than I can, but our thinking is perfectly aligned. And the concept is that happiness is not the ultimate goal that you're looking towards, though. It's not happiness. It's actually what you want is peace and joy in your life. Happiness is temporary. It's external and it's temporary. So, again, by definition, I can absolutely buy it.
I was going to say that's the stuff we're getting sold to us.
Absolutely. I mean, if you walked out in the parking lot right now and saw that I had bought you a brand new plug-in, whatever, let's call it a brand new Jeep Wrangler. Thank you, Jeff. How about that? Your Jeep Wrangler, or a Porsche, or whatever. You're like, man, I'm so happy. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I don't care what anybody says. If that would make you happy, you get a brand new Jeep. Come on. Of course it makes you happy.
I'm with you.
Now, let's fast forward a year later. You probably are used to it. You don't care anymore. Driving it's just like any other car. And that feeling you had the first day driving out of the parking lot, it's long since gone. Happiness is fleeting. It's temporary. It goes away. And when it goes away, then what do we have to do? Take more money and go find and buy more happiness. So it buys happiness all day long, but that's not what you want. You want true joy and contentment in your life. And the peace piece that we talked about earlier, that was so huge. I was making some notes, actually, trying to write down when I was coming through this exercise for us, because I could really come up with the whole peace, which peace is the condition of the heart where anxiety and conflict and fear no longer trouble us. It was really tough to kind of define the joy one, which my definition is the condition of the heart when gratitude, generosity, optimism, and love take over. And so if I'm kind of depicting those, I think about like this. And actually, Pastor John Piper with desiringgod.org, that's it. He gave an analogy where there's picture peace and joy as two rings, and they actually overlap. Mm-hmm. But the joy ring is much bigger. It's a much bigger thing. And as I described, the peace is more like a contentment, right? And the peace is like trying to get yourself up on the shelf. And once you're on the shelf, that's great. But joy is the air that we breathe. Mm-hmm. Peace is climbing to that perfect perch on the mountaintop. You're there. But joy is the view and the air and the sunset and everything. So having both of those is the key. And truly, money is not going to buy that. The absence of money, joy and peace can still exist. Mm-hmm. But happiness requires money.
Which is a very good point to tie into my question earlier. Somebody that doesn't have a lot of resources can absolutely still, every day, all day, achieve these things in their life, which are the more important things.
Correct.
The ultimate goal in life, and I know Jeff is sitting there, is not to have a gigantic bank account and to pass on your kids. That I'm at least not my goal of life. My goal of my financial life may be that, but not the goal of my life.
And I was going to say that brings up an interesting point, which takes me back to Rick Warren. And I've got to tie a spiritual side of this because it's an important part of my life. But I was at a Kingdom Advisors conference and got to hear Rick Warren speak one time, and it affected me. Rick Warren is the pastor of the Saddleback Church in California. Wrote the Purpose-Driven Life, and he references this in his book and in his speech. It was so great. He says, "I believe when I get to heaven, I'm going to be asked two questions. And one of the questions is, did you know my son? Or would you do the relationship with my son? Define however, but basically, did you know my son? Of course, now he sits back and is like, you kidding me? I founded one of the largest churches in the country, wrote one of the most successful Christian books on the surface of the planet. I planted and founded hundreds and hundreds of churches and witnessed to so many people." And he's like, yeah, I had a relationship. I knew Christ, my Savior, and I got that box checked. What's the next question? And that one can be easy for believers, but then the next one's the one that was so powerful. He says, the second question I believe I'm going to be asked is, what did you do with the gifts that I gave you in your lifetime? And Rick kind of stepped back from the microphone and was just like, whoa. Because gifts isn't just money. Gifts can also be health.
Absolutely.
You had great health. What did you do with it your entire life? Well, you taught other people how to have great health. And so gifts can be health, it can be family members, it can be friendships, it can be money, it can be anything. So the point is, for me at least, recognizing in my life what gifts have I been given. In this case, I think it's a unique ability to connect and help people with money. And so it gets back to our vision of the practice, which I said is to be the obvious choice for guiding clients to joyfully steward their resources. Because at the end of the day, we don't take all this with us. And we'll be accountable for what we do with all of our assets. So understanding all these components, I think, is huge as it relates to what is our overall purpose for this planning and for our health. And these different areas of health in our life, like the spiritual, physical, financial, mental, because eventually we'll be called upon to ask some questions on what we did with these gifts.
And if you can't tell, what I love about Jeff, he's passionate about this. And that's why he's so good at it, right? And the passion's driven by many things. Not, even though you had that epiphany moment, right? There's many things that almost continually amplify, right? They up the magnitude of your passion or your drive or your purpose for what you're doing. And just to jump back for a second, when you were talking about happiness versus peace, I want to tie in the neurochemical action of health in there, which is kind of interesting, which has been echoed numerous times in research, is happiness are those constant hits of serotonin or dopamine, right? Happiness is a drug, man.
Absolutely.
Right? I'm gonna get on ChFC and rip down the lake. He even said I looked like a little kid on Christmas morning. I was happy as all get, a lot of dopamine flowing. But I could do that all day long, and I may get done, and Jeff's like, "Are you good?" Yeah. And I may even say, "Man, I'm content." That may come out of my mouth, but that's not what happened. Contentment is not something that happens in the neuropharmacy of your brain or your body. It does not. There is not a contentment thing. You may say, "Ooh, that's oxytocin, that's GABA, the hug, basically hormone." No, it's not. It's a state of mind. And what rules the neuropharmacy is your mind. So if your state of mind is going to be formed by those values and beliefs, the only way you're going to get to the contentment and the joy and the peace part, again, is going back to the values. And I know I keep reverberating this, but I want to just hammer this into people's heads. I won't say nothing in your life. It will be very difficult in your life to accomplish any goal, financial, health, relationship, spiritual, without this process in place. And that's why I keep asking, this is what interests me most about people. I love watching biographies. I love reading books about stories about people, because the people that are successful employed some sort of process. Rarely, even the people that we say they had a lucky windfall, right? An actor that got picked up off the street. They may got picked up off the street, but they're still a successful actor because of the process they put into place after that one thing. And that process is huge. And I know Jeff, we're going to talk a little bit about Jeff's health life now from a process standpoint, because I've got to know Jeff a little bit more this summer. So we know that what your kind of workout style is, right? We do some CrossFit workouts. I said you're a runner.
We do.
But what I want to talk about, and this get into more specific stuff, I told Jeff we're going to do this. He's already looking at me with a sly smile.
What are we doing?
But he is a night owl, and I'm a morning person. We're big about processes and routines and habits, But I want people to realize, because I hope that from the short conversation we've already had, people got a financial piece of this. But we could talk to Jeff all probably for 2 weeks nonstop about finances and never hit the depths. But what people probably get more, or at least I get more out of, is understanding, well, wait a minute. Jeff had to learn the lessons he's teaching to other people. How did he learn those? But not only the lessons, what's he employing every day to make himself continually successful? So let's just talk about some of the fun stuff. So walk us through a day. Walk us through a typical day of Jeff. Like kind of a little bit of everything.
The easiest is to think of the bigger calendar first. On 5 days a week in the office, Mondays and Fridays are typically my buffer days where I'm not meeting with clients. I will, but we just don't typically, because there's so much work that is involved in the preparation for our client appointments. That on Mondays and Fridays, we're using that to either prepare for the following week or close out work from the previous week. There's a lot involved. So those are what I call my admin days. And on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, it's just back-to-back appointments all day long. Client coming in, probably like you, where you see patients coming in back to back to back. And you know that after each patient, you might have to make notes and things like that. We'll have a whole amazing team of people back in the office that enable me to be able to do all that. So typically, arrive in the office about 8:30, and then I'm seeing appointments all day long, and then if I'm lucky, I'm out of there around the earliest 5:30, and sometimes it's more like 6, and I hope to be able to get to the workout at Iron Tribe by 6:30, I think is the 6:30 evening slot. And then it's quick bite to eat, go grab a shower, and then I'm at home, and because I'm single and not married and no kids, then I'm working until crazy hours in the evening, which is where you're getting at.
What is it again?
What time?
Yeah. What's a typical, so you called it, what was it, the Jeff work session? There was a Sunday night, like you were sitting down at 9 o'clock.
Oh yeah. And then I'll probably go to bed around 2 a.m. or something like that, which, you know, people will get emails from me from time to time. What in the world are you doing up? And it's so funny, I was telling this story to one of my buddies in the office, Vaughn Sparks, a dear friend, and he was kind of giving me a hard time that I spend time thinking about so many cerebral things, and I told him I almost sent him a message at 4:10 in the morning when I was laying in my bed trying to come up with a written definition of joy for our discussion today. It's like, who else sits there at 4 o'clock in the morning trying to think of a definition of joy? It's just,
But kind of why I wanted to bring this stuff up too is we are all so individual. If you got into the health spectrum with this, there are a lot of people that would be like, oh my gosh, Jeff is not going to last. Well, it's lasted, right? You've been doing this for a while. They would say, oh, he's going to be so unhealthy. You're not unhealthy. No. So we have to also take into the individual components. And again, you can go way off on the science realm, right? Look at somebody's genetics, look at upbringing, what were you conditioned to do. But it literally comes down to how you feel, right? You told me, again, you kind of pay the piper on the weekend and catch up on your sleep, which, again, if you look at sleep research, a lot of people say you can't do that. Well, you feel like you can. And like you said, your beliefs create who you are. And I know some people would say, well, that's BS. No, if he feels better doing it that way, it will be impactful, right? So it's kind of that push through the week, these kind of later nights, and then you get to Saturday, and it's a little catch-up period, right? For the most part, it's right. Very nice lake house, which the scene itself will reduce all of those anxiety, fears.
It does. It actually does. Well, and to your point, I mean, this morning, I fell asleep last night reading, and I think I probably went to bed, I'm sure, around 2 o'clock. And when I fell asleep, I had forgotten to set my alarm on my phone just to wake me up. And I woke up actually about 10 minutes prior to when I normally do. It was about, say, 10:15-ish. I mean, not 10:15, excuse me, 7:15. Got ready and was in the office about 15 after 8. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't have been able to wake up had my body been incredibly deficient on sleep and time. I just naturally got up. So
absolutely.
That pattern does work for me. I don't suggest it for everyone. No. And I did try the thing where I flipped it and was getting up and doing CrossFit classes at Iron Tribe in the morning. And I did that for maybe 6 months, and then
wasn't for you though, right?
It just was miserable.
But here's another important thing to see. You were willing to try, and you did. You also didn't do it for 2 weeks, you did it for 6 months.
Yeah, it was 6 or 9 months.
You talk about discipline, and again, I'm always trying to extract stuff from people for the people listening. not many people even employ a dietary change or a financial investing change or a savings change for 6 months, which you can have massive effects in 6 months in any area of your life.
No doubt.
So I love that you just kind of threw that in there just on the side, but that's a big deal, right? You put it in and you still, at the end of the day, said, I'm going back to how it feels better, even though, and again, this is where in my field we get stuck in this evidence-based mind of research. All the research would say that 6 months trial was the best way to do it. No, it's not, because you're very successful the way that you're doing it, and people need to learn from that and learn to listen to their bodies and learn to listen to themselves a little bit better from the health side. What are there any other kind of, maybe they're just Jeff-isms for health, are there any other things that you do for your health that you think are not necessarily quirky, but just things that you do that you're like, hey, I do this, and this, I really adhere to this because it makes me feel better?
Well, I learned the hard way, and I got to this place that I'm about to describe really more by mistake.
Is this the Porky story?
Yeah, and, oh well, no, I can tell that one. That was a good one. That's how I first started getting in shape. Oh, that was brutal. But I, again, obviously a bit of a workaholic, and love and obviously passionate about what I do, and that's why I do it. I've said it's not really work, because if you love what you do, then it's just, you do it because you love it. But I was doing it too much, and so after a long period of time, I finally convinced, and friends convinced me that I was going to follow my dream and build a lake house, which I've been to. So what I've learned from that is the importance of having something in your life that you can go to, if you will, and I'm using that figuratively, not necessarily literally, that allows you to completely unplug, but not just unplug, it instantly recharges your batteries. And I've learned that that can exist. I didn't know that it did. And for me, it was following the dream of having a place at the lake. And I mean, I can just pull down, see the water, and I can feel instantly being plugged in and recharging my batteries. And so maybe this is something other people or everyone else in the world already knows, but I learned later in life that if you can have something like that you can come just unplug from, man, it makes life so much better. So for me, from 1st of May to 1st of October, I'm at the lake every single weekend without exception. And I tell friends, I love you, but don't ask. No birthdays, weddings, bar mitzvahs, showers, whatever. Don't ask, because I'm not going to be there, because I've got 4.5 months to enjoy that time, and it's that important to me. So you can come have your birthday at the lake. Come on, have a wedding at the lake if that's what you really want to do. But I've got to have that connection because I feel it.
Well, and that's, again, you've identified that for yourself, right? That's not necessarily value, that's priority.
And what's interesting is how that impacts my financial life. You can argue that it hurt my financial life because I'm paying for that, but I can argue that it's helping my financial life because I'm much more engaged and I will last longer doing what I do because I've got that connection. Had I never had that in my life, I would, no question, have had to retire sooner or burn out faster. So sometimes what seems like a bad financial decision is ultimately a good one too.
And that's a beautiful concept. We had Dave Hall on the podcast a couple episodes ago, a gym owner here in town, and we both were, kind of ruminating on the idea of you can't pour from an empty cup. But so many people try to, right? And that health and everything, and like you've tapped into what that was, and you didn't have it for a long time. You know, not necessarily you didn't have it in a true place, but now you have an actual, literal place to go to. You know, some people that may be meditation, some people it's prayer, some people it's just friends. My wife and I are very different, right? Sloan and we did these. That's the other demeanor. We did these personality assessments not too long ago, and hers, it just shows you what you already knew, right? But it's just like it affirms it on paper. And hers was she's extremely social, and she looks for that interaction, and that recharges her batteries. That's literally what they said. I'm the exact opposite, right? I love being around people. They called me, what was it? Basically, I pick and choose when I want to be social. I can be extremely social, but I retract, and the way I recharge my body is getting in my mind, is getting into nature by myself and just hanging out, right? Hitting the trail, hiking, doing something, and my wife knows, we've only been married not all that long, and she kind of has gotten to the point where every once in a while she'll be like, you need to go run or do something.
Go away.
So it probably not only recharges my battery, but it gives her a little break from my uncharged battery.
Google introverted extrovert, because that's what a friend of mine showed an article about that, and it's kind of similar to what you're talking about. We're probably
Selectively social is what they called it.
selectively
Yeah.
social, but an introverted extrovert.
Mm-hmm.
Because every now and then we've kind of got to just go be.
So that's what you identify as?
Oh, there's no question.
Yeah.
No question. I mean, sometimes just it's back to what we call it peace, stillness, whatever,
Mhm.
but quiet.
Yeah.
I thrive on that. Just to go be alone in the woods or something is.
And I think we just lack a lot of that nowadays too, though.
Sure.
There's so much coming at us all the time, just everywhere, that some people thrive, right? Like you even told me though, where you position your house on the lake had to do with the amount of activity going on.
Correct.
So you do thrive in that somewhat high energy environment, but at the same time you realize like, hey, I need that other part.
And this is actually so true because the house and the dock and the water and all that was strategically positioned and bought, etc. And then I ended up buying a piece of property to the side of mine that's nothing but woods because I found that I got this ridiculous amount of pleasure just putting on some boots and going walking into the woods. Beau, I had no idea how much I was gonna just. I love it. It's the best thing. I can't describe it to anybody. People are like, what are you doing in the woods? Nothing. I'm just walking around. That sounds so weird.
Dude.
Dude. I am. I got a machete that I take with me every now and then.
I saw the machete.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
In my garage?
I kind of wondered, I was like, what is Jeff thinks gonna... Jeff and I kind of also share this. He's a bit of a prepper. Jeff is one of the most prepared people you've ever probably seen or met in your life. And I went to put something in his refrigerator. I look over to the right, and it was a giant unsheathed machete. And then there's like a rifle laying over there. I'm like, what is Jeff expecting to happen out here?
Yeah, I tell you, there's some sweet vines and things to hit in the woods. Take that thing with me.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, in addition to Jeff liking to throw on some boots and walk through the woods, we also know that you like to throw on some other duds. I found your style icon from Birmingham. So Jeff had no clue I was going to pull this stuff up, but I told him we were going to have some fun, so I appreciate him being on the show, so why not? But I'm going to put a link in the show notes to, this was B Metro magazine.
Yes.
Jeff's in it. I'll tell you what, he's a very stylish guy.
Thank you, sir.
But on this article, you guys have to check out his closet. If you have closet envy, I know my friend BJ listening, you're trying to have your game at Jeff's level. It's not there yet, bro. It'll get there. It'll get there.
BJ Ellis is one of the guys that said, he called me up one time and asked, are your t-shirts on hangers? And I said to him, I said, yeah, why? He's like, of course. And apparently that's a thing.
But see, this is again the circle you run with, right? Your friends will ultimately like show me your friends, I'll show you you.
Right.
BJ asked, I believe, we'll ask him later. BJ asked you that question to try to get better. It wasn't necessarily because BJ wanted to be like Jeff and have his shirts on hangers. He knows you're successful and he's trying to emulate you with the highest form of flattery, right? His mimicry. But I think that's kind of cool because that's what I've done my whole life unbeknownst to me, right? Do you remember the TV show Palladia? It was all music, right? And we're gonna get into your music career.
Oh yeah.
So Palladia was all these biopics of all your famous artists, right? They would cover Zeppelin and Neil Young and all this, and they just went through their life and showed the story of from childhood to where they went and how they got there. And I just love that because it shows the process.
Well, success leaves clues. So if you want to be successful in life at a particular thing, find somebody that is achieving the success that you want and go do exactly what they've done and do it better.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a big part of my story, and I've had several amazing people in my career that I've just followed and mentored. And a great one was the late Pat Summitt, who is the coach of the retired coach of the ladies balls basketball in Knoxville, Tennessee, winningest coach in NCAA history. And her big thing was she had an open practice that anyone could come sit in and watch. She had coaches coming in and watching her practices. And her thing was, you can watch. You're not going to be able to do what we do because it's not that she's smarter than anyone else. She's going to outwork you, which is amazing to me. And that's kind of been my philosophy all along. And I heard her say something one time. We were on a bus together, and coming back from Madison Square Garden in New York, and she was frustrated about the practice. The coaches or the kids weren't playing well, and she said, "I refuse to coach effort." That has stuck with me. It's such a simple thing, but think about
That's
that.
huge, though.
She basically, you got to bring effort to the table.
Yeah.
Which is, again, simple but profound. Never forgot that.
When I'll throw this out there for my colleagues listening, in our field, there is a lot of protect and hide, right? I'm going to do this over here, but if somebody, like I've sent numerous emails to people or Instagram messages, "Yeah, I love what you're doing. Can you explain to me why no, that's, no, I'm not going to tell you." And it's like, wait a minute. If we're truly colleagues and we're trying to elevate this field, like I live thousands of miles away from you. I literally can't steal your clients, but there's such a protective nature that's scarcity mindset. That's what it is.
It's scarcity.
And that will destroy you internally if you're just constantly sitting over here. So I love the Pat Summit thing of, hey, come watch me. It doesn't matter even if I show you everything, I'm still, whatever it takes, I'm going to do it that little much better than you.
At the company I franchise through, Ameriprise, there's about 9 or 10,000 advisors, and the top 1%, or roughly 90 to 100 guys, go off on a conference every year together. And within that group, there's about 15 of us that have chosen to be a part of a group called Quantum Leap, where 4 times a year we circle together and meet, and to do exactly what you just said, to share everything of our best practices. So we take the most successful practices, put them together, and then share everything they've got. No secrets, no nothing, which is incredibly powerful. And that's back to what you were saying. If the people that are the best in class would get together and share ideas, it raises the whole level of things.
Literally a quantum leap.
There's
just
no
leaps and bounds. Yeah.
No doubt.
I love that, and especially, you tell me, and this is nothing that Jeff wouldn't allow me to share. Like on parts of here, he said, "Hey, this is proprietary. Like, don't ask me the specifics." So there are things that obviously you don't want to just throw out, but at the same time, you're going and meeting with people that are helping other people within your field, and you're bringing back their ideas, they're bringing back your ideas. So you still keep it within your house, but you have your group that you're sharing your ideas with. So it's not just Jeff Roberts by himself in his office in Birmingham, Alabama.
Correct, and we've been incredibly successful, and so to some degree, I feel that we do like to kind of give back, and we do a decent amount of mentoring. It's yesterday morning I had a call with a mentee, if you will, that I'm coaching in the financial planning business, and as they say, to whom much is given, much is expected. And back to the issue, we talked about what Rick Warren teaches us. Someday I may be called upon to say, well, what did you do with the gifts that I gave you? And so we've been incredibly blessed with financial planning success, and so it's a matter now of helping other people to do the same. Which is really what my role has become more and more about, is helping other people on my team to help other people become more successful. So it's not just through me and my clients, but it's my advisors and their clients.
And I think what we'll start to wrap up with is, we've mentioned numerous times, like value-driven purpose, right? Like you base like your grooving your path based on that value, and you just kind of said like you're at that point where it's you're starting to give back, right? You're starting to mentor. There are many people, the financial realm, the health realm, many professions that are they're putting information out. Social media is awesome, right? People can share, they can try to teach. I think you can instantaneously see if somebody's sharing and putting information out to actually help, or if they're instantaneously wanting something back. And I think that's a big thing for people to realize, and the reason I bring this up, Jeff may not know this, we try to really help people build a filter. So if you listen to the show, I want anybody to be able to go, if they never have a financial advisor, if they have one already, that they can already go, well, wait a minute, I heard some of these things. I need to see if that improves my filter, right? And at the same time, there may be things that I don't agree with at all, and that reaffirms what I'm already doing. That's totally fine. But there's too much information out there these days without people like you that are really out there. I just incredibly think doing it from the right place, right? Not just for, I'd say the right reason, but from the right place. And the right place is that you are trying to eventually help others in numerous ways. Teach people within your own field. Get people to reach their financial goals, but also help yourself be a better person. So I just love when you you start at the bottom, right? It was Jeff Roberts, financial advisor, but then overall you cannot do your job without you being better, somebody being better that's above you and below you, and then the people obviously that you work with.
At this stage, and you know this in business, any good business owner surrounds himself with people a heck of a lot smarter than they are, which is, I'd say, if you're talking to me, you've got the dumbest guy on the team by far. But it's back to what you said too. It's what we discussed earlier in the conversation, which is having the mind of the capitalist and the heart of the social worker.
Yeah.
Which is what you were just basically describing.
And I think that's hard for a lot of people because you tell me, and maybe you'll disagree, your heart can get a little hard in business, right? You come up against some stuff, right? You get a bit cynical. I watched a really cool video that I'll put a link. Dr. Snell put up a video the other day. I'll send you this. You'll really enjoy this. This guy named Slow Mo that rollerblades. He used to be a physician. He triple board certified physician, and left it all. Went and got an apartment and went down to the beach and just started living, just rollerblading every day because he said he was becoming an asshole. And at the end of the day, he goes, I think that my life was predicated on get the next thing, make more money, do well in business. He burnt a marriage. He went through all these things, and he goes, I became an asshole. And he goes, my goal in life is to never do that again. That's my only goal in life. He goes, I've been afforded the financial situation based on what I did previously to make sure that at the forefront of my life, it's all of those things that we've talked about in this entire podcast. But he had to give everything else up to make that happen. I think what hopefully people get out of this podcast is you don't have to give that up. Doing these things should amplify those goals and those purposes in your life.
It's true, and just back to the financial side, it's not that complex, and that's why we try and take very complicated things but make it easy for people to understand. And it's just having the right habits and doing it systematically and choosing. Like this guy, he just chose, I'm not going to do this anymore, and he adjusts his lifestyle accordingly. If people just want to get a better handle on their finances, it's just make that decision. I believe that most people really seek and desire an amazing relationship with a financial advisor. They just don't know who to turn to.
And I'll tell you, and you probably know, it's fear. Just like you said, most people do not want to walk in. Like the first time Sloan and I went to a financial advisor, we had just opened our practice, and I said, we need to go talk to somebody, even though we can't afford to pay anybody. So we went to a Dave Ramsey financial advisor that was on his list, and we just went and we said, we have exorbitant amount of student loan debt, business loan, all this stuff. What do you say? He goes, you're in a different scenario than most people. She was terrified, absolutely terrified. Didn't want to talk about money because she wanted to bury her head in the sand because if she didn't know, she didn't have to face it. But I think that's what a lot of people deal with is they don't want to walk in and open up the book, just like people don't want to open up emotional trauma or past things in their life. But once you do, you can face it and then you get over it.
And as strangely as it sounds, what you just described is not uncommon because people will then go years of not looking at it, years.
Mm-hmm.
And we find, and this is true, that more people will spend time planning their family vacation in a year than they do their overall family finances.
Which is detracting from the finances.
It's true. Now, of course, our job is to change that.
Right.
Force them to come in and pay more attention, which is big. But what you described, that situation with you and Sloan, it's real. It's very real.
Mm-hmm. So as we wrap up, we'll go over some of these pillars one more time. Is there a piece of advice that time and time again, I know that there's a lot that you tell clients over and over. Is there just one resounding thing that you end up telling people, right? Like if you could say you're moving to a new office, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so on your new office, say the company that puts up Alexander Chenard's billboard said, hey, we want to give you a free billboard.
Gracious.
What would you put on the billboard? And it can't be call me.
That's I knew you were call like that. Gosh.
I know I'm putting you on the spot.
No. It's good. If it would have to be, and it boils down to the fundamentals of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Plan, execute. So I probably, if all I could say to the world was, okay, Jeff, as far as your financial knowledge of 26 years and it needs to be just a couple words on a billboard, it would be, and you want them to remember you by it, plan and execute. Because if they just do those two things, if they'll just boil it down to just that, it's really what it's all about. You have to have a plan. And then you can't just have the plan, you have to execute on the plan. It's that simple.
Which takes everything that we talked about, the entire thing, right?
Yeah.
Values, beliefs, discipline, all that.
All of it. But if it was just down to plan, execute, that would be it. And by the way, exercise on a regular basis. Just a plug for your thing.
But no,
otherwise you're getting the Porky story.
But the plan and execute is in all aspects, right?
Right.
So if we had to go through, like you mentioned numerous times, you had your subsets of health, right? Mental, financial, physical, spiritual, right? Well, we need those subsets, but there's also in each one of those plan and execute, plan and execute. And then I always talk about micro, meso, macro. Those are cycles in strength training usually. Micro is like what I do every day. Meso is what I do maybe over a couple months.
Right.
Macro is year and then year after year. We have to think about it like that too, because the coffee I buy every day will be my micro effect. The macro is, it costs me $300 a month. $300 a month costs me $3,600 a year, and I do that for 10 years. Well, what are you doing? You know what I mean?
Right.
People don't look at that, and that's probably a lot of what you do is, like you said, kind of, just showing them the forest through the trees of that 30,000-foot view.
No question. And it is, to your point, it applies across other disciplines.
Yeah.
Plan, execute. Because with the fitness side on me, years and years ago, I was 25 pounds heavier than I am now. Which doesn't seem like necessarily a lot to some people, but on a little guy like me, 25 pounds is huge. I mean, that was me in my heaviest, which is dramatically different as you can see than I am now.
Still styling though, guys. Still styling.
And what happened, I was at work one day, and one of my coworkers, the office manager at the time, was sitting down at a table, and I was standing kind of above her. So she's right at eye level with my belt. It's so funny. And she turns and looks at me and literally sees my belt line, and she just goes, "You're stretching the pleats out on those pants, aren't you there, Porky?" That's exactly what she says. And this is the words that came out of my mouth. I said, "I know, the cleaners has shrunk every single one of my pairs of pants. I don't know what the deal is. I gotta go talk to him." And as soon as that came out of my mouth, the moment it came out, I just realized, wait a minute, they haven't shrank all of my pants. I've gotten bigger. And so then it was plan, execute.
Yeah.
Because once I realized there was a problem, which, I hit 30-something years of age and my metabolism shut down, and I can't eat Milo's hamburgers and sweet tea every single day, right? So plan, execute.
Yeah.
Which came back to fitness, and then then you begin to have fitness problems when you do the wrong things too quickly and too fast, and have to go see people like Beau. This one.
Well, and we didn't really discuss this, but is there, just talking about that real quick, so maybe this is a good point to bring up, too much of a good thing is a bad thing, right? So obviously, saving is a good thing, investing is a good thing. This is my standpoint, and I've talked to this about Sloan numerous times. That second tier is, lifestyle, ensuring lifestyle.
Correct.
I've never been of the mindset, and I think we still have money going into investments and savings every month.
Right. We
could be putting a lot more. But I have had a certain lifestyle and certain things that I want to do where I've had to decide that. And like you said, I think some people love the menial life, being so frugal and saving all their money, and that's their thing. That's fine. I think some people literally lock themselves in a prison of saving, investing, paying down debt. And no knock on Dave Ramsey's philosophies, but I think if you lock yourself in that prison, you're robbing yourself of your happiness and your peace. Well, what if you do that for 10 years and all of a sudden you end up with a terminal disease? Or that's been my thing the whole time. You just don't know what's tomorrow. That does not mean throw it all to hell in a handbasket.
Correct.
It means decide what's important to you. And if some of those lifestyle things or those things that may cost a little bit more money detract, then it's $100 here and there, and you could have put that $100 in savings, but it makes you happy. What are your thoughts on that?
No, you're right on, and I have a personal story. So 3 of my fraternity brothers from Sanford came to visit me several years ago, and they're great guys that basically get together and travel 3 or 4 times a year on a guy's weekend trip, and they came through town, wanted to see me, and come hang out at the house. And we were doing that. I want to say maybe the conversation came up like, don't you have some property up the lake? Have you ever done anything with that? No, I hadn't built it yet, etc. And so I had these three faces of accountability. These guys that have known me my whole life, practically, or since college anyway, and they were saying, why haven't you done anything with that? You know, what are you doing with your money? So here are these guys talking to the financial advisor, right? And they're going at me, you don't have kids, you don't have wives, you don't have ex-wives, so therefore you have all the money in the world. You're saving, you're in the financial services industry for 20 years. Why are you, of all people, why don't you have a lake house? And so, back to the point, it was one of those things where I'll never forget it. I sat there on that porch and I looked at those guys and I said, I'll tell you what, I'll guarantee you, the next time you come here, say a year from now, I will have built or be building a lake house. You're exactly right. And it was sometimes that extreme that I was living, I was guilty of myself, where I was accumulating this mindless, endless wealth and not really able to enjoy it. And then I had to act and execute, and I created a plan. And that plan was I wanted to build something that created a reason why other people could be around me. Because I realized I'd cocooned myself being an isolation guy, single, no kids, no family, and not going to softball games with my kids and everything, being around other people. And my own nieces and nephews needed to have a reason to come down from Tennessee and be with me. And so that's what this house has become, is a draw to bring people around that ordinarily I wouldn't have been around. You and Sloan, you all been in my lake house, what, twice now? So that's twice more than we probably would have hung out had it not been there.
Absolutely.
So yes, to your point, I do believe, and that's why the confident retirement approach, the 3 or 4 tiers on that kind of pyramid, the second one is ensuring that financial lifestyle, because it is important. And you cannot live in a barrel today so that I'm comfortable at retirement. There has to be a balance or you won't get there.
Right.
You'll burn out along the way.
Yeah. And just an interesting thing that I drew from a couple of those stories, you've always, more or less, you've had to have somebody call you, right? Somebody had to call you Porky. Somebody had to say, where's your lake house?
Call me out. No question.
It's no different than when somebody walks in your office, walks into my office. We always say the first step is awareness. You have to bring awareness. So
excellent point, but you're spot on.
What I want to wrap up with here is you don't know what you don't know. So yeah, let's say it's your finances that and like most people do know what their biggest detriment is. They do. You know, they may blockade it, they may have a true block, right? But subconsciously, maybe even consciously, you know what the biggest area of your life that you should be putting the most work in that will then have a ripple effect in every other area. Well, it's finances, it is scary, but if you take that first step, you may find, it's not as scary as I thought. It's not as hard to fix as I thought it was, right? The quality, and this is no different than my field, and I'm gonna call this as I see it. It is no different than the quality of the practitioner that you work with. And I'll tell you that all day long, and I'm very confident in saying that. There are people that will help you better than others. I think everybody can help you, just some will help you better than others. Also, it's gotta be a fit, right? There are gonna be people that don't mesh, right?
Yeah, there has to be a connection.
But basically what I'm getting at is draw awareness to your situation, educate yourself on the situation, right? And in Jeff's words, basically plan and execute. Think we hit it?
We got it, brother.
All right. Thank you so much for being on, man. I appreciate it.
Show me it. Thanks, Beau.